pleasure to have you here, Andrew.
Pleasure to be here.
Yep, I was wondering. Yeah, welcome to your own home.
I guess it looks like it more than it feels like it.
Mm.
When I think about being a 21, 22-year-old kid, I can't remember what that feels like. So it doesn't feel. This feels like what it is right now.
Mm.
And what more do we have to accomplish or finish up? What loose ends do we have to tie?
Mm.
That's what I'm looking forward to feeling.
Right.
No, not really.
No.
But when you start, you're not thinking way down the road. You're just
right.
thinking about you're in the moment, hopefully. Well, I don't even think it's a question of being happy. Sometimes you're really angry, and sometimes you're really frustrated. But if you have some belief in what you're doing and think that there's still gas in the tank and you're still making good records, then I guess you'd hope as a collective that you're all on the same page and you just want to, let's just keep plugging away. Maybe it's not working out exactly as you thought it would or exactly as I thought it would, but there's something there, and there's still some satisfaction in doing it. Mm-hmm. So why knock it off for just petty bullshit reasons? He's very lucid and sober about, not even just specifically in the definition of that word, but he knows the ins and outs of the music business, and he's an encyclopedic kind of knowledge of all kinds of. If you ever have a question like, who recorded that weird Ronettes record? Jay he'll sort of shrug his shoulders if you ask him in a room full of people, but actually, and then he'll say, Doot 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 did it at 9:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in Cincinnati or whatever. He knows everything. He always tries to keep everybody together. He's definitely a glue sort of personality that everyone else kind of revolves around, both on a social level, on a band level, and he wants it to live, and he loves the idea of the band / the family, and he's always sort of championed that. Patrick, he's written most of the songs that have gotten me a SOCAN check every 4 quarters.
He's the moneymaker.
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, I don't think he necessarily set out to do that. I certainly don't write songs to get played on the radio, but that's just the way it's panned out. When I think of the ones that I used to think were my strongest effort, now looking back like a few albums beyond, I don't really think of them as my strongest track. I don't know. I really like the ones that I have on this most recent record.
Right.
But I always gravitate to the most recent stuff.
Right.
Just because it's new for. I can't remember how long it took. I mean, probably a year or so. But Halifax, growing up there, was such a small little insular community where it didn't matter who you were. People just went to shows. Like, there were only maybe 3 venues to ever play, unless you were, one of these traveling bar bands that would come through to this sort of knucklehead clubs in Halifax that nobody wanted to go to from our circle. So it seemed like we had friends that would just come and gravitate to us sort of right out of the gates. I guess I do recall that, and I remember that feeling of validation or whatever, and this little sort of gang of goofs that got together and started playing Kiss covers in my bedroom, recording them on 4-track. Now all of a sudden we're playing our own songs, and there's a bunch of people here that I've never seen before. Yeah, I think you can't help but recognize that as something. Well, Peter was just one of the most enthusiastic music fans that any of us knew. And before Sloan, Chris and Jay were in a band called Kearney Lake Road, that Peter had kind of a quasi-managerial position with. And again, when you think of a manager, when you're a really super young band like we were, like Kearney Lake Road was, you're not thinking of somebody who's really super business savvy. You just want a cheerleader who's there to, you know, get on the phone and try and book you a gig opening for so-and-so or whatever the case may be. And Peter was really great in that regard. But then when we started to be courted by this label or that label, we had taken on another guy, Chip Sutherland, as our lawyer initially, and then Chip and Peter kind of became this duo management, which really it was like nitro and glycerin, the two of them together. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you view it, or however anyone views it, Peter and Chip split, and Chip sort of kept on with us, and Peter went off in his own direction. And you know, that's unfortunately how these relationships end up sometimes. I don't think they were trying to make us the Canadian Nirvana. Like, that's just silly, and it just happened to coincide with Nirvana exploding into the stratosphere of crazy record sales and huge popularity, and we got swept up in the wake of all that. But there was no real desire or design by Geffen to turn us into anything except what we were. But what came to kind of a surprise or a bit of a curveball to them was the second record that we made that was nothing like the first record that we made, except that it was still us, and they didn't know what to do with it. And at the same time as them not knowing what to do with it, every single person at Geffen was terrified of their own shadow, because there were all these internal shuffles going on. That was sort of kind of like the beginning of the end of the major labels. Like, this is when everything started going down, where people have a job today and they're fired in the morning. So we unfortunately got caught up in that bullshit too. And, you know, it was meant to be, I think. Yeah, I think so. Or, I mean, it was, again, like, it was just something that had to happen. And it was very frustrating, and it was hard on us as a young band who were all of a sudden touring for months on end for a record that wasn't being promoted by our label. That's pretty gross feeling. But the learning curve was vertical for us in so many departments, and that was just another big lesson of how this game can play out. And it tests your mettle, I suppose. Well, I wouldn't say it was scary, but yeah, it was really utterly disappointing, and, like, you know, that whole experience kind of turned us against one another. Nobody really knew where the problem lay, and, like, what what did I do? What did you do? What did we do? And it sucks that you have to take something like that, because it's Geffen is just a greedy, heartless, giant corporation that has they don't give a flying fuck about you and your young band that you've put all your heart and soul into. All they care about is making money. And we knew that, you know that deep down going into it, but when you're really the product of that mentality and the result of it doesn't feel very good, especially when you're young and you have these big high hopes.